And I said to him, his name was Dean. I said, Dean, how do you stay so calm? And he looked at me and said, what do you think we do here? So I said, you sell real estate? He goes, no. He said, we help people. He said, if you worry about your sales and your numbers, he goes, you'll struggle. It's always, be chasing anything. He said, just learn the game, go out and help people. The rest of it takes care of itself. My faith is pretty much the most important thing for me. And I can't detach from faith and what we do. When it comes to working with people, dealing with people, the wisdom that I have learned is through my understanding and learnings from the Bible. So, love your neighbor, love the man upstairs. We put the best version of our life out there on social media. So the expectations becomes that everyone's life is great except mine. Everyone's business works great except mine. No, it's not. If you get beyond the social media post, everyone's got their challenges.
Yes,
and that's just life. If you choose to be in a position of leadership, whatever that looks like, owning a business, leading a team, anyone who wants to take on that responsibility. When you start a business, a lot of people, as you said earlier, they learn about, the numbers and how with the sales and the formulas and, earnings and tax. They don't get taught necessarily. You're going to be responsible for a team of 1 or 30. Those people you're dealing with, you're looking after human beings. So that's a responsibility that you shouldn't take lightly. Worrying about training people and leaving your organization. I'm more worried about not training them and them sticking around.
Today I'm sitting down with Alex Hezari from Taylor Nicholas, someone who's spent over 20 years in the commercial property space. Alex has built his business and team from the ground up. He's very involved in the development and the growth of people around him through networking, business and his church. People who know Alex know him as a man of faith, integrity, honest character and strong leadership. And to top it all, he's an all-round gentleman. Alex, welcome to the Connect podcast.
Thanks for having me, mate. It's great to be here and it's a privilege to be doing a podcast with you.
Mate, I want to take this podcast in a couple of different directions today because we've had a couple of conversations in the past. But before we go into these different directions, I want to hear your journey and what that looked like to get you to the position you're in today.
How far back would you like me to go?
As far back as you feel comfortable. I want to see what the stepping stones were in your business world.
I suppose my career in property started back in probably went back to when I was a teenager. Mum and dad, very old school. They always wanted to make sure that I further my education and so forth. So I had to make a decision at some point. I was a semi-professional quasi soccer player, but I wanted to obviously pick a career, something that I thought I had some talent in at the time. So it was probably I'm going to say when I did a little bit of work experience in a residential real estate office that I decided I could do real estate. It was more of a case of saying, okay, well, I'm capable of doing this if the world of professional soccer doesn't work out. And then I went about over, that would have been age, I'm going to say 16, 17, just basically figured out a career path, studied, did a commerce and property degree with Western Sydney University. Took 4 years to complete that. As soon as that was finished, life of sport took its natural course, and I'm glad I listened to my parents' advice to always have a plan B. So I started working in real estate, started from the ground up because of just my circumstances. I had to start from the ground up, didn't have the opportunity to sort of start, say, in a corporate environment and what have you. And very much went about making sure that I become the best version of myself at the time and just progressively improve from there. Just built off the back of, every day going to work and giving it my best, making sure that I don't shortchange myself or the people I work for. Built it from there, built a little bit of a reputation. I started, as I said, ground up. So in property, that's like a property officer where I started. Quickly got into property management. Then when global financial crisis hit in 2008, I thought, what better way to sort of challenge myself than try and get into the sales and leasing environment. Because I suppose the best place to build from is when the market or when you feel like you're at rock bottom. So the market was at rock bottom. I thought we can only get better from here. And if I can I suppose earn my stripes when the market's tough, then I'll just, I'll definitely make a good go of it when things improve. Did that for about 2 to 3 years, and then opportunity came to start a business. And like many young people at the time, or like I suppose, I've learned a lot from the exercise, made plenty of mistakes along the journey, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Obviously, probably with hindsight, certainly do a lot of things differently, but that's hindsight.
Yeah, well, and it came from residential real estate. It wasn't commercial at the start.
My work experience where I ended up working, and I'll delve into it. I basically used to help out my brother who used to work for a residential real estate office on a Saturday, put signs out, very, very basic stuff. And he worked in an environment, we wind in the clock back to the late 90s. So Saturday auctions in that area was very active. Lots of people, lots of activity. But the guy who ran the office was always very calm. And I said to him, his name was Dean. I said, Dean, if you don't mind me asking, he said, do you have any questions? How'd you go today? Very nice guy. And I said, yeah, how do you stay so calm? And he looked at me and said, what do you think we'd do here? And me, I was very shy. I was sort of had this thing. I was like, what kind of a question is this? This is a trick question. So I said, you sell real estate? He goes, no. He said, we help people. Real estate is just how we help people. He said, if you worry about your sales and your numbers, he goes, you'll struggle. It's always, be chasing that thing. He said, just learn the game, go out and help people. The rest of it takes care of itself. And that's why I went, well, that sounds simple enough for me to make a career out of. So that was about the only bit of exposure I had to residential work.
Yeah.
When I finished uni, I got into commercial property.
How long ago was that?
The bit of advice of finishing uni?
No, Dean's advice.
Dean's advice would have been 2000, I would have been 16, 17, I would say. So 90, I'm giving my age away here. It would have been late 90s, 98.
Late 90s?
98,
yeah, wow. Yeah. And you've held on to that. You've held on to that example and you've held on to that story for this long.
I'm very blessed. I think those moments, and I don't know how I can only comment on life, I suppose, through my own lens. But those people who've had such significant impacts in the person I am today, those moments, I could close my eyes and it's like yesterday.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, wow. And I can only imagine what that developed into over the years as a compound effect.
Correct.
So that in itself is a pretty important note. And I love having these conversations because there's these gold nuggets that get thrown in from people's exposure to different old school business owners. That in itself, don't focus on the numbers, focus on helping people. I think a lot more people just hearing that need to understand that concept in itself, because it's too often, in my opinion, that people are focused on the metrics and if I'm going to hit the KPIs and not hit the KPIs, but they take away from the value behind focusing on what the bigger picture is and working at the higher level. Mate, that's a mad solid bit of advice. I'm going to hold on to that one. And actually helps with something I'm working with at the moment. So then going into going into the commercial space, starting your own business, what was that like at the beginning? Everyone makes mistakes at the start.
Look, it was a time where, so going through uni, a lot of my friends ended up working in the sort of the institutional corporate space in town.
Yep.
And I grew up, my mum and dad moved to the hills in late 90s again. So there was a bit of me, part of me that wanted to explore that and see what that's about. But the opportunity came up. As I said, I just wanted to get my foot in the door. Opportunity came up. I pretty much saw an ad for a job that I wasn't necessarily, said a job for a property manager and 2 years experience. I was applying for jobs that sometimes I thought just, fate works in a particular way. And called this lady and I said, look, I don't have the experience, but I'm happy to learn and I'm happy to work for free if until such time that you feel like paying me. And that's how it all started. And then as I said, I just went in. I was very, very blessed because when I reflect, just interesting thing is when I decided to work full time, I had to give up soccer. So because soccer used to take a lot of my time, training 4 or 5 nights a week. I live in the hills. I used to go to uni at Quakers Hill and played soccer for teams like Cronulla. So, and this is before a lot of these freeways that we get to enjoy these days. So when I decided to do that, I remember Dad giving me this advice saying, listen, you tried your very best with the football and now let's just focus on, your career as a agent or whatever it is you do, whether it's valuation, agency, the property development. And my first job interview where I was successful, the gentleman who interviewed me, I think I spent the first 40 minutes talking soccer because we just had that in common because it was on my resume. So yeah, so as I said, as life would have it, even that in itself was sort of paved the way for me to get my job. But just got in and I realized there was a lot to learn, and it was probably at, I suppose, 18, 19, 20. There's a part of me at the time that I thought 30 is very old, so I need to get my act together and acquire and achieve everything I want to do by that time. So I was very dedicated and I was very intentional about things. And then I realized that it's fantastic, I suppose having the upbringing of qualifications and uni degrees and so forth, and they're fantastic, but there's nothing like the hands-on experience that you get working in the field. So as I started to work, I realized there's a lot to learn about what I hadn't learned, which is I'd learned the theory side of things, but now it's time to put it into practice and in the space that we operate in. And I've always sort of been in that space of whether it's hospitality or service or sales. So it's all about helping the person on the other side and applying what you've learned to do that. So just build one block at a time.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're dealing with a lot of people, a lot of business owners in the commercial space where they're looking at purchasing opportunities or leasing opportunities with some big money. And I know what it's like in business sometimes with other business owners, and sometimes people get a bit funny between different characters and different levels of success, whatever it is. How do you feel? Have you worked out ways of navigating through different types of characters to achieve an outcome? I know if the focus is constantly wanting to deliver and wanting to support and help, but you're being met with an interesting character, how would you approach that?
I don't necessarily whilst it's, I suppose going back to what you're saying before is, we definitely do a lot of training around our area. So whether it's technical or obviously interaction with other people, because it's all emotions and people and individuals. And there are certainly, personalities that are more colorful than others. Probably.
I love how we're beating around the bush.
We're bouncing around it, but look, it's probably, I'm going to say, I don't necessarily change my approach. I'll probably start with giving everyone respect. Regardless of size of the transaction. That doesn't really come into play for me. So I find that if you treat everyone, I suppose, like they're the most important person in front of you at the time, you usually get the best out of people. So I'd probably take that on every occasion. So, and sometimes I can tell, obviously after a few conversations or what have you, well, I've certainly got my work cut out for me on this transaction or the conversation. But just treat everyone how you want to be treated.
And sometimes people push boundaries, correct? Like
of course.
In between your team in the office or your clients that you're dealing with when you're trying to make transactions happen and deliver on either side. How would you feel the best way to step in when someone pushes a boundary would be?
Depends what the boundaries are. So I suppose if I look at our business, my team, that going back to the respect thing, so for me, there are certain no's. You don't disrespect people, regardless of whether they've made mistakes or not, whatever it may be. So those situations, I step in very quickly. So I sometimes feel like almost like a parent stepping in to protect their children. So we have our core values, right? And I know every organization has those and they're very dear to their heart. So for me, it's very much around making sure that what we're doing in the space that we are, and we are doing our very best to provide a quality professional service. It's very much making sure that you're aligning with people who are like-minded. And that usually eliminates a lot of the potential frictions down the track. And I'm a genuine believer that we might not necessarily be the right fit for everyone. And that works both ways. So I'm certainly not trying to win 100% of anything. It's more about, okay, we know what we stand for. We know where we deliver. Let's do our very best to service and help the people that are in our space, in our sphere, and then just build from there.
And about from the start, I know every business owner, when they're first starting out, and if you can think back, we always like that from the beginning, because I know I certainly wasn't. I know we're there now.
The core value side of things, so the ethics side of things, always from the beginning. Where I probably have changed over the years, certainly out of the learnings, is learning what I'm really good at outsourcing the rest, probably overdoing some, like trying to help, but by doing things that I wasn't necessarily the best at.
Yeah.
I wasn't even doing the best thing for the person I was trying to help. But I've very quickly learned that for me to be best serve the other person is to make sure that I focus on what I know, where I can add value, and then bring in other people to do that. But as far as the ethics side of things is concerned, and you're right when you said earlier, we deal with, transactions that are worth a lot, and there are many shortcuts, but there's only one right way to do it, and we'll make sure that's the way. And you're never wrong in doing the right thing. So.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you're met with disrespect, I guess disrespect between different people means different things. When you say disrespect, what do you mean?
Just unprofessionalism. Like something as simple as, at the end of the day, we all have our ups and downs. I think also if you choose to be in a position of leadership, whatever that looks like, owning a business, leading a team, we're all in positions of leadership, right? Different, whether it's in the area of family or professionally. That's a responsibility. And I think anyone who wants to take on that responsibility, when you start a business, a lot of people, as you said earlier, they learn about, the numbers and how with the sales and the formulas and, earnings and tax and this, but they don't get taught necessarily. You're going to be responsible for a team of 1 or 30. Those people you're dealing with, you're looking after human beings. They all deserve respect. We're all differently gifted. We're all individuals, right? So that's a responsibility that you shouldn't take lightly. So if I find someone who's not treating that as with respect, I do my very best to bring it to their attention and trying to diffuse situations, or just, as I said, just goes back to, is this the sort of approach that we want to have happening long term?
Yeah.
So unrealistic expectations are just people who, for example, they take out their anger and frustration on a team member of mine. That's just not something that I take lightly.
It's not on.
It's just not on.
Yeah.
No, it's not on.
Are there any stories where that's happened in the past?
Plenty. How long have we got for this?
No, what comes to mind?
Look, we work like a lot, I suppose, for us, when we say clients, I'm referring to owners of properties.
Yep.
Sometimes through those, you'd have the opportunity and the responsibility to work with some tenants. And I think in many cases, due to probably just a poor start to a relationship, not understanding their obligations under their lease agreements, they're of certain beliefs as far as what their obligations are. So when we get involved, obviously, as managing agents, because we manage properties, it's very much around enforcing the conditions of the lease. My clients are just as accountable as the other parties are, and we go off the rule book, so to speak. And sometimes, obviously, that means people are coming up with payments or expect financial commitments that they didn't expect. Something as simple as not meeting the rental obligations.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of times, as I said, when you get time to, and that's where building rapport really comes in, is once you scratch beyond the surface with any relationship, any business or personal, there's a lot going on in that person's life. So as much as possible, where I really encourage my team is get to know the person. This isn't just another tenant. This is another transaction. And let's not look at them as their X value and Y value. Let's just treat everyone with respect and expect the same in return. And if they're not giving you that in return, let's have a conversation about it.
It's interesting. There's a couple of different points that stand out to me. And I'm curious to know, based on previous experiences in different areas across clients and team members, I'm curious to know, when you deal with your team and when you deal with your clients, you consider them friends?
Team or clients?
I want to hear both.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my team, I really focus on my team first and foremost.
Yep.
So for me, they're family. If you look at, it's very simple, 24 hours in a day. We're told to sleep 8 hours a day, left with 16 to do everything else. Out of that 16, typically 8 of it is at work. So we spend more time with colleagues than we do with our family members. So if you look at it based on the time spent, they're just as valuable. But more importantly, I just like the environment. As I said, what's worked for me might not work for others, but I've grown up on very much strong family values. that's what kept us close, kept us as a unit. I had good leadership with my father and mum. So when it comes to running a business, I very much try and adopt those very sort of old school values in what we do. So my team, I respect and I admire, and I'm blessed. My team, in all honesty, most of the time it's me trying to get them to work less or just take more care of themselves at work and so forth. So my team, very much family, not even friends. I'd say family. I'd go as far as what I would do for family, I'd do for any member of my team. That's why also, when it comes to growing the team, I'm very selective.
Yep.
And now I'm very blessed to say my team takes a very similar approach. So when we have a potential job interview for a new team member, the conversations that happen between them is very much what's going through my head. So that's really, really good. Clients, I very much like to treat them the same, but I also appreciate that we don't necessarily, there's core values and there's things that as I said to you, they're the non-negotiables, but I deal with a lot of successful people who have their methodologies. So when I serve them, I look at how can I best serve you? And I usually make sure that's always about them. When you sort of get out of your own head and stop worrying about what's in it for me, it becomes a lot simpler. So I spend the time to get to know them, understand what their needs are. Are we the best people to serve you for a number of reasons that all get taken into consideration? And then it's a matter of making sure that we have good, honest conversations and dialogue, not a monologue, a dialogue around how can we best achieve their outcome, because it's very simple in our space. For us to succeed, our clients need to succeed.
Yep.
So, yeah. So I still very much, I suppose it's a little bit of my nature. I think I enjoy the human element a lot more in running a business and people. I love people.
Well, it's authenticity.
Yeah.
I bring it down to authenticity. When I develop a relationship with my team members and I connect it around a family type approach or a friends type approach, it just means that I really appreciate who this person is as an individual, and he's the best person or she's the best person for this position. And I know after hours, I could probably kick back with them and have a laugh, and I trust them, and I know I'll have them back, and I know they'll have my back. There's been cases in the past, and every business owner would have gone through this, where it's easy for someone to let themselves think that way or try and convince themselves that may be the case with particular team members, only to then see the true colors of some people just through certain tasks or decisions that they've made. And then it's natural for the business owner to start questioning themselves around, well, I always consider this person as a family member, but they just did this.
Yeah.
I'm going to start questioning who I consider as a family member in my team in the future. Have you felt any of that in the past? Have you experienced any of that in the past? What do you feel you can speak to in regards to that?
I suppose it's definitely been through experiences like that where, for example, you think you're on a certain path with a team member and then they all of a sudden surprise you to do something totally different. I probably, and this may sound somewhat very simple and naive, but I don't stop caring and loving the person just because they're not part of my team anymore. We all make mistakes. I encourage, one of the things I strongly believe in, we have to separate the person from the profession, the character of the person. So there's character flaws, then there's professional shortcomings, right? A lot of the experiences I've had is just, for example, having a young person who says, I'm going to work for this company. I want to build X, Y, and Z. I want to be with you for 5 years. We have very open conversations about it. Next minute, they've moved on. I found another opportunity. And a lot of that, I think, look, as where we sit as an organization is, have to be realistic. I genuinely have conversations with people say, I don't expect you to work with us for 30 years. But if we're going to work together for a year or 2 or 3, let's make it very good years.
Yeah.
And I'm, it's the old saying of, worrying about training people and leaving your organization. I'm more worried about not training them and them sticking around, which is a thing that we hear about a lot. So it's all about investing in people. At the end of the day, the big man upstairs takes care of everything else. Yeah. So just have faith. love people, serve them, whether they work for you or they're clients.
Well, then that sort of takes me into my next conversation. And some people may or may not connect with this, but how do you feel your faith has supported your life and supported your business?
My faith is who I am. My faith is pretty much the most important thing for me. And I can't detach from faith and what we do. So when it comes to working with people, dealing with people, I draw a lot of my, if I like to, I can't claim it, but the wisdom that I have learned is through my understanding and learnings from the Bible. So I just bring it into love your neighbor, love the man upstairs. Very, very simple. So, yeah.
And was there a certain point, and we don't have to go deep into it, was there a certain point where it just made sense to you, or was it a continual compound practice thing you did over time? Was there a certain point where you're like, no, I flipped the switch, I'm now fully focused on having faith support my life? Or was it, you know what, let me try and dip my toes into this a bit more?
There was a very clear moment where I sort of, how can I say this? There's a moment where you come to a realization. For me, I came to a realization there's more to life than what I was going through. So that was very sort of black and white. But the faith journey and understanding what that faith requires you to do and the person you need to become, I think that's more of a bit of an evolution as far as the behavior is concerned, not the promise. The promise is different.
What do you mean?
Well, the promise is salvation. Yeah. So that's one thing. But to be a, I suppose, if I may say, to be a good Christian, what does it mean? How do you, and as you said before, it's about authenticity. What anyone, young, old, relate to and what resonates with people is authenticity. So if you're holding a certain flag, but your actions are totally opposite what that faith stands for, then people are going to look at you. You judge a tree by the fruit it bears. So if the fruit doesn't match the tree, then people are going to look at the tree and judge the tree, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, for me, it's very much about making sure that I'm on the right track all the time, and it's a process for me. We might touch on this later. It's just a daily devotion, daily exercise. Make sure I start my day right. I just find if I do that, the rest takes care of itself.
Yeah.
And look, from time to time, we are also reminded that we're only human. So
yes, yeah, that's
certainly not sitting here claiming to be perfect. Far from.
Yep, and I feel, touching on the authenticity, I feel it's a human element, and people call it gut feeling, when someone can tell that someone else is not being authentic. The people I've seen that have evolved with their faith and had their faith support their lives and their businesses are the ones that I would say are more authentic as human beings. What sort of growth have you seen in yourself and how it's affected your life, that business, that faith has affected, faith has supported, sorry?
Significant. So as I've touched on before, there's certain values that I had with my upbringing. But the faith journey, I suppose, is very much learning how you could do that daily. And more importantly, how do you apply it to the difficult customer, the difficult guy who cut you off on the road where you're driving to your next appointment? All those situations where I suppose your behavior or your character is going to get tested, that's where faith comes in. And they're all opportunities. Those tests are coming your way for a reason. And if you're sort of grounded and not trying to take things into your own hands necessarily, I find that usually you find the peace and the calmness to do it. And then the more you learn about, or the more, for me, I suppose for a lot of business, I don't know, like I hear a lot in the various spheres that I try as much as possible to develop myself both from a business perspective and a faith perspective. Once you get comfortable in your own skin and the fact that if everything you're doing now, whether it's X amount of dollars in your account or zero, doesn't change the person, doesn't change who you are, then you get comfortable with a lot of things. So not many things start to phase you. That also helps with your management of your the way you conduct yourself.
Yep.
Calmness steps in. You're not, you don't become irrational. You don't react, and really just you go about your daily things being the best version of yourself you can be.
On that note, you give off a very calm demeanor. Very calm demeanor. You always come across as collective and certain when you address people, when you have conversations. Now, in moments of pressure, how would you navigate through that? Because anyone would have a certain degree of pressure that I guess would blow the top off, if I could say.
Yeah.
And I know over time, over various amounts of pressure testing through different things in business, you just get better as a human. Exposure therapy, you're exposing yourself more and more to it, you become better. But then you get tested a lot sometimes. How do you work with that? How do you work with the pressure? And I'm talking between your team, between the people in business you deal with as clients, between who you are as a person.
How do I deal with it? Probably going back to what I said before. First of all, you can never change what's already occurred. So if someone comes to you and they've said the biggest mistake, you can't change it. So reacting to what's happened already, you're already sort of starting behind the eight. So it's more about, I suppose, if you were to break it down into past, present, future, you need to spend all your time in the present and plan for the future and learn from the past. So whether the past is 5 seconds ago when someone told you they made a mistake, or whether it's whatever it is. So I find not, the old saying, crying over spilled milk. It's done. Doesn't matter what it is. And the other thing I've sort of learned over the years is, if there's something that's likely to give me stress or apply pressure, how can I avoid it happening ever again?
Okay.
And was this my fault? And if it wasn't my fault, but I'm not talking about finger pointing, because the old saying is you point a finger at someone, there's 3 fingers pointing back at you. It's more about, how can I avoid this? What role did I play, or what should I have done, and have I done? So and sometimes you like going back to what you said, you could communicate to the best of your ability, and something breaks down, whether it's a relationship at work, outside of work. It's too late to worry about, other than how do I avoid this? And at the same time, depending on where there's stress, and I'm happy to maybe talk about a couple of examples, but generally speaking, just knowing that a lot of the things that we think are major problems and not when you fast forward. So one of the things I suggest, I recommend to people, I say to them, when a problem hits, I say, ask yourself, in 5 years' time, will I care about this? Right? And if you don't, then you shouldn't worry about it today. Or, there's a saying, and I love reading about wisdom and on wisdom. So, they say you have 100 problems, then you have a health problem, and you only have 1 problem.
Yeah.
So it puts things into perspective, and as much as possible, if you're involved and engaged in your community and the people you deal with, as I've gone back to what I said before, if you get to know people, scratch beyond the surface, everyone has problems. We all meet, and especially these days with social media. Social media is wonderful. I'm no critic of it. If there's any criticism, it's based on how we use it.
Yep.
The tool, you can't blame the tool, same as a knife.
Yeah.
It comes in handy in kitchen, and that is used for wrong things. So we put the best version of our life out there on social media. So the expectations becomes that everyone's life is great except mine. Everyone's business works great except mine. No, it's not. If you get beyond the social media post, everyone's got their challenges.
Yeah.
And that's just life.
Yeah, of course.
So yeah.
Don't cry over spilt milk. I've said that 3 times this week. Not for myself. I actually reminded a couple of team members, but it's great because I use that example, and I connect it to acceptance. When things happen, it's easy to get triggered and reactive in the moment. But as a leader, it's up to you and how you show up, and what the results come off the back of how you react to things or respond to things. I feel over the years I've taught myself to just come to acceptance with whatever's happened, because then I'm not emotionally triggered by the situation and making the right decisions. Now, the point you mentioned, when there's one finger pointed at the other person and three fingers pointed back at you, it's easy for leaders and business owners to step into that mindset, which is there's accountability, there's responsibility. And if you're working towards being a leader and a great manager, that's the mindset to take. I feel when you're trying to express that to team members that aren't in management positions or aren't stepping into leadership positions as of yet, there's always resistance. Now, when you're dealing with resistance in trying to influence and support a team member, what would your approach usually be? How would you have those conversations? You want to support your team. You want to influence them to be the best versions of themselves. They haven't put the same amount of development that you have put in yourself, but you really want to make sure you're supporting them as best as possible. You want to make sure they're not taking it the wrong way and the message lands.
It's a couple of things. I think, so I am of the generation where the leadership was about do as I say, not as I do. That's the old mentality. The new mentality is they'll watch what I do and they'll do exactly that. Right? Doesn't matter what I say. So I think if you're looking at the work environments and the culture these days, it's very much about you need to lead by example. So it's about being honest with yourself. First and foremost, as a leader, if you made mistakes, own it. Acknowledge it and own it. Don't sugarcoat it. If you're late to an appointment, apologize to your team the same you would to the most important client, all the way through to major issues. Also remember as a business leader that, and how can I put this? There's a reason why you're leading a business and that person isn't at that point in time. So have realistic expectations. And where people fall short, I think it's as much as possible, be very proactive about what it looks like to be a good team member of this team. And acknowledge those. I can't remember the name of the author, but I think it's called the 2-Minute Manager.
Oh, yeah.
So find every excuse to compliment your team as much as possible, because the more of those positive affirmations you do, it is likely that you'll have less of negative things to deal with. Because if someone, for example, you ask them to do something for you and they do it in a timely manner and it's accurate, then make sure you don't just say thanks. Say thanks because you managed to do it within the time frame and I'll review the document and it's a great presentation. Fantastic. You're just constantly reminding them of what the expectation is. I think if you do that naturally and organically, it's far better than, and I'm not saying it's one or the other, but it's far better than, hey, once a week, once a month, let's get together in a boardroom and let's talk about what great looks like. Because I find those things are a little bit like motivational talks. They get you up and energized. 2 days later, reality hits, right? So it's a constant and a very intentional leadership style, which is I'm here, I'm engaged, and I'm looking and I'm observing. So as the leader, right, it's a little bit like a coach. A good coach is on before they start warming up and when they've cooled down, not just the heater moment or when they're 1-0 down in a soccer game. A lot of my learnings around team environment actually, I suppose when I reflect now, years on, is actually off the back of what I've learned on a football pitch. So it's very much about the good coaches that I used to sort of respect were the guys who used to walk the talk. If they asked for something, they definitely led by example. So, but also, I think they say you're as strong as your weakest link. And I don't mean that, again, let's separate the person from the performance. The human being, fantastic, wonderful. If you could have team members who are beautiful people, but they're not they're not suitable for the job. And you need to have those frank conversations. If you got someone who, for example, I remember many, many years ago having a conversation with a young guy, loveliest guy, in my opinion, great salesman, wonderful with people, not necessarily attention to detail. I remember I said, why do you work in real estate? Why do you want to work in real estate? He said, I love meeting people. Fantastic. He could, start a conversation with anyone. I said, what is it that you don't like or you don't think you're going to enjoy about it? He said, look, to be honest, I don't like paperwork and stuff. I said, but here you are applying for a job in property accounts. That's all attention to detail. And he said, oh, well, I want to get my foot in the door. I said, that's great. But this is only going to expose an area that you're not going to excel in. So if anything, in my opinion, you're actually going to move back because you're going to come in, you're not going to have a good experience. If you've got good leaders looking after you and they're going to invest in you, they're going to realize that's not you, which means at some point they're going to move you on either within the organization or unfortunately during your probationary period. Yeah. So let's have that honest conversation. And again, goes back to doing what's best for the person when you meet them. Yeah. If it's a great team member, bring them on board. If you think they're going to do better over at I don't believe in necessarily competition because I think whatever's meant to be mine will be mine. No one's going to take that away. So if you think it's the other brand that's down the road, send them that way. You do the best by that person, the rest takes care of itself.
Yeah, right. What happened to that boy?
Look, I can tell you.
Did he join the team or was this during the conversation?
I don't want to get too much into it, but because let's just say he learned the hard way, but not with my firm.
Yeah, right. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Alex, I actually really love how you described influencing your team in such an easy way, because it's very often that business owners feel the obligation of having a motivational moment with the team and saying, hey, we're having this weekly discussion and we're going to go into our goals and how we should show up. And I'm going to put my hand up and say, I've definitely been guilty of that in the past. But this gives me a different perspective on next time I have conversations with team members. So it's constantly just reaffirming the positivity in what they've done when they've done it correctly around the tasks that they've done.
And if you do it openly, right, then everyone's going to hear. So don't be discreet about acknowledging good work. If anything, make a big song and dance about it. Yeah. And I think just generally, I find in whatever profession we're in, whether you're a surgeon or your line of work or my line of work, we get very comfortable. It just becomes what we do. It becomes second nature. It's also remembering that the client you're looking after, like if I'm selling a property for a client, for me, it's just another project, another transaction, right? And you get very good at it, which means you know the process, you apply it, it works. But for the person you're dealing with, it's the one transaction they're going to do, probably in 2 to 5 years' time, whatever it may be. So give it the time that it needs. On the flip side, with your team, make sure you celebrate the wins, small or big, because I think the more you celebrate and acknowledge positivity, the good behavior, then not only are you going to see more of it, you're also just organically just reiterating the company expectations and your expectations from different positions. Yeah. So
yeah, absolutely.
And it builds momentum and energy.
Yeah.
Because and that's where I think. Sorry, I've cut you off, but I think comes back to what I said before. If you've chosen to be in position of leadership, because I can tell you in real estate, there's for example, 2 avenues predominantly. So you can either go down the avenue of property management or sales and leasing in commercial property, right? And if you do really well as a sales and leasing agent, sometimes, not all the time, things are changing, but in the industry, they'll make you a sales and leasing manager. The things, the skills and the traits you need to be a people manager is very different to a salesperson. Salesperson typically is driven by numbers, performance, and so forth. All of a sudden, they give you 6 individuals to manage. And you're a high performer. So the guy who doesn't turn up to the sales meeting on time is going to irritate you. That's not your area of strength, right? So it's very much making sure that if you've chosen to lead a team, you've got to allocate time for it. You can't rush, which is, I think, we're particularly in a lot of micro to small business in Australia, that's where we fall short. Most small businesses are started by technicians, right? So we're good at what we do. We start a business, fantastic. Then comes a lot of the other aspects of it. We don't necessarily give the team the time, the nurturing, the hands-on learning that is required. And depending on the positions and levels of expertise and experience, they might need more or less. And it's not always about the technical side. There's life aspects. So if a team member, and you got to acknowledge, and I think if you, as a leader, if I think that I'll come bring it back to me, if I think that my team's going to turn up every day and be at their best, I think I need a reality check. We're going to have our ups and downs. There are times where I'll look at my team member, for whatever reason, just 3 bad experiences in a row, tired, went out, walked into a factory, 40-degree heat. It's like a steam room in there. You spend an hour and a half in them in a suit. It's not comfortable, right? We and I were having this conversation earlier. So come back, mate, go. Call it a day. Go have a day off. Afternoon off. I think it's the more you encourage people to pick up the responsibility, not the hours, the better it is. They really need to be clear, and your expectation needs to be defined. I'm very much, I don't necessarily like the term micromanagement because I think in our culture has just a negative sort of perception. If you're a business owner and you love what you do, you are gonna get involved with everything. And it's a fine balance of where you get involved, where you let the team self-navigate through things. But yeah, for me, it's all, again, going back to have the difficult conversations, but very much be very proactive about it. Be very proactive.
Yeah. With micromanagement, it's funny you said that. I always think back to where I first was when I started to build the company and put employees in positions that I was doing before. You can't help but be obsessed with making sure that they're doing it to the standards that you were doing it at the start, especially. And then the first time I remember I got called a micromanager, I'm like, whoa, okay, what is that? I didn't know. And then obviously it sounded negative and it took me by surprise. And I thought to myself, well, I don't want to be labeled this specific thing. I wonder what I can do to still get the result that I need to get. I want to make sure that they're doing the job to the standards, but not be called a micromanager. And that was an interesting journey for me because there was an element of control I had to let go. Yeah. But there was also a moment of growth because people essentially want to do the best they can a lot of people would want to do the best they can in their position. And it's hard for a technician stepping away from that position and delegating it to someone else to not get involved at the micro level until he's 100% or she's 100% confident that they're doing it at that standard. But then it also takes away the element of letting that person learn how to get there and develop themselves to getting there. So it was an interesting journey I learned over the years. And every now and then I get sucked back into little moments of micromanaging here and there. I'll remind myself, I'll pull myself out of it. Yeah. I do remind myself I'm still human. Yes. But I can only imagine how many business owners haven't figured that out. Yeah. And can't help themselves but to constantly say micromanage. I was actually surprised. I actually read from Patrick Bet-David in one of his books that
love that guy.
I love him to death. I'm looking forward to the day I meet him and shake his hand. But in his book, he actually mentions a point, and this could be a cultural thing between Australia and America. Yeah. Maybe tall poppy syndrome is involved as well. Who knows? But in his book, he actually said micromanage until you're confident that this person is good at what they do. And it made me think that that's interesting. I wonder where he's coming from in that perspective.
Good point. I look, again, as I said, I certainly haven't gone. I've learned a lot through the exercises, just interacting with people. But I think one of the things I would say is, and I have these frank conversations with people that I work with, internal, external. I always I do my utmost best for them to realize where my heart is versus where my delivery is. So my heart is to serve you, right? If you're young and you've just joined my company, my heart is to help you become the best version of you. I can only do that based on a very frank dialogue. I can only help where I can see to help, right? And sometimes my delivery might fall short, but as long as I think, and most people probably pick up, and that's where authenticity comes from. Sometimes it's not even necessarily some of the people in our industry that are highly respected. They're not necessarily the finest, the most polished presenters, especially real estate. And that space is changing significantly in our industry, right? What a successful agent looked like in the 90s, fast forward to today. And again, I'm looking at both, although I haven't done it, but obviously I'm very, I have interactions with many residential agents. So if when I got into real estate and I was talking about sales, they're like, oh, you got to be at least 40 plus. Otherwise people are going to go, you're not experienced enough, because it's an industry where a lot of it's still about life experience and negotiation experience, right? Whereas now, if you take the successful guys who are very successful through technology, through faster learning and everything else, the average age would be 25 to 30.
Yep.
So I think in terms of the micromanagement thing that we're talking about, I think when I'd love to maybe get you to send me that particular podcast I've had with David, but I think it's about staying tuned in till they're done and ready, but not necessarily getting involved, like doing it for them. But then take your eye off the ball until you know they're going to deliver. Because that's where I think a lot of businesses also fall short, where a young person or someone who's still learning a particular role comes in, and a lot of organizations based on whether that person is ready or not on time, not performance. So, and again, it goes back to, oh, well, the guy is done. You've got to make a decision. They've been there for probationary period of X. We're going to keep them and then let them go. And, it goes back to investing time into people and making sure that they're getting the level of supervision that's required. So,
I love that. It was I'm pretty sure it was in his book, Your Next 5 Moves.
Your Next 5 Moves.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was in the book. It wasn't in the podcast.
Okay.
Mate, I want to quickly touch on negotiation.
Yeah.
And we'll wrap up the episode on this. With negotiations over the years, now you're dealing with different business owners, different characters out there in the world. If you were to summarize the best type of negotiator or the best way to hold negotiations, I know there's a whole heap of different elements to it. How would you summarize delivering in a negotiation? Or facilitate.
So we're facilitating. So I think the successful salesperson is probably someone who's coming in. I think the most successful relationships, whether they're short-term transactional, long-term transactions, is where you create a win-win situation. So it's about being obviously working on your communication skills, your ability to build rapport, to get to know the person. And particularly in the space I operate in, one of the things that appealed to me about commercial property is about I suppose it's more numbers driven, not as much emotion. What I also counter is when I hear people say, well, commercial property is all about numbers and not people, not emotion. I say, well, you're still dealing with people. So there's emotional involvement. And then you and I can relate to, if we work so much in our business that a business becomes a very important part of our life. It doesn't become who we are. We have to make sure of that, right? What I do is not who I am, but focusing on a win-win scenario, knowing expectations, again, being very strategic and proactive. So if I'm working for a client, I need to understand where I suppose the parameters, where the expectations are, what will be acceptable, what will not be acceptable. Honesty goes a long way in our line of work, of course, because if I sit with you and you tell me your expectations and I know based on my experience, right? And we make decisions based on what I call the 97%. 3% will always be, there's always unique situations. But if I know I can't get that for you because your expectations are unrealistic, whether it's a sell price, whether it's a timeline, whatever it is, I need to be frank with you and tell you up front. Not win the business over just for the sake of getting Alex's name on another property and then 3 months later letting you down or hoping that I will condition you. I think that's a little bit, that's dishonest. Goes back to my faith. You have to be honest at all times. Whether you win one bit of business or 100, you have to work on being very good at what you do. But when it comes to selling, find out what the expectations are, be realistic, work on win-win situations. And also at the same time, you have to be able to help people see beyond, going back to the problems that we spoke about earlier. Sometimes people get, and I've been through it many, many times, they get fixated on something that is so minimal. And yet you as a person who usually, as I said, I sit and I can see the 180-degree view and I go, I cannot believe this deal is not happening. And it's not always me involved, it's me collaborating with other agents or someone in my office saying, I cannot believe. And personalities and ego comes into it. So someone gets attached to something. So you really have to acknowledge and learn to observe, understand. I find it's just as much about the person as it is about the transaction. So,
Absolutely.
but look for win-win situations.
Yeah. Alex, wrapping up this episode, we finish up each podcast by asking this one last question.
All right.
Now, you're going to be taking 3 people out on a dinner date. These 3 people you choose can be anyone from the history of humanity or anyone in your current life, anyone in today's world. Who would these 3 people be?
Jesus Christ, King Solomon, wisest man to ever live. Third person, King Cyrus.
King Cyrus. Who's King Cyrus?
King Cyrus, Old Testament king,
Okay.
Persian king.
Okay. I'll look into that one.
Yes.
All right, Alex, thank you so much for today's conversation, man. I always like having conversations with you, and this was one that definitely delivered with the value that you bring to the table.
I've thoroughly enjoyed myself here. I appreciate all the questions and really appreciate your time, mate.
Thank you, guys. We'll see you guys on the next podcast. I hope you guys found some sort of value in this conversation, and thank you, Alex. Take care.
Pleasure. Thanks.